Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Today is Wednesday, April 10th, 2024. It is 3 p.m. and this is panel number 18057 titled Leadership for a Sustainable Future. Welcome everyone and thank you for joining the Conference on World Affairs and the Center for Leadership for our student panel. I'm Seth Webb, the Director of Experiential Education in the Center, and I have the pleasure of sitting among an amazing group of students from various parts of our university studying various topics, all of whom are 2024 Student Leaders of the Year awardees. Given CU Boulder's strategic imperative of shaping tomorrow's leaders and producing graduates who can apply intellectual curiosity, rigor, and collaboration to creatively address the complex issues and opportunities of the 21st century, our primary objective with our time and theme is to discuss leadership that supports coupled human-environment systems and the complex challenges and solutions associated with ensuring both people and our planet thrive. Before we get started, the University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty in their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support, and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Lastly, we want to be sure that you all have a chance to ask questions, so we'll reserve time at the end for some Q&A. We're using a note card system to receive questions from all of you, the audience. At any time during the session, if something sparks your interest or curiosity, simply raise your hand to request a note card and a pencil from Lucas, our producer, who's wandering around or will be highly noticeable somehow. I can't see him because the lights are so bright. Please write legibly on your note card, and if you are a student, please note that on your question card. When you finish, raise your hand and give it to Lucas, who will bring it up to me. I urge everyone to please make your questions brief and to the point. Okay, and now I would like to do a brief introduction of each panelist. For more information, you can find their full bios on the CWA website. To my right, we have Megan Fall. Megan is a sophomore majoring in business and working as a student employee for the Volunteer Resource Center. She is serving as a PALS peer mentor, as a site leader for the inaugural Winter Alternative Break, and is involved in the volunteer placement program with Colorado Reading Partners. Megan is also a lead scholar, a Dalai Lama Fellow with the Renee Crown Wellness Institute, and the president of CU's chapter of Be the Match. Additionally, she has taken the initiative to spearhead a new partnership with Judy's House, which provides support to grieving children and their families. Megan is a selfless, determined, and respectful individual who demonstrates grit in everything she does. And a fun fact about Megan She recently had the opportunity to meet with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, just about a week ago, right, earlier this month, a couple weeks ago, through the Dalai Lama's Fellows program. So we're particularly interested in seeing if she can weave that into some of her comments, because that's a pretty fantastic fun fact. And next we have Kayla Jarrow. She's a fourth-year student in the LEAD Scholar Program and is studying business administration with a focus on finance and business analytics. She has held leadership positions across several organizations, completed prestigious internships, volunteered, and gained experiential learning that helped expand her global mindset. Kayla is a tutor through the Pick a Peer tutoring program and was recently recognized for her dedication and commitment to her work. She is a devoted member of the CU Boulder community with an incredible strength in instilling confidence in those that she mentors and tutors. And a fun fact about Kayla is that she has visited all 50 states in the US of A. That's pretty cool. I have not done that myself, so you're off to a good start. And then on my opposite end, we have Nicole Woods. Nicole is studying psychology and is serving in the Air Force ROTC program. This academic year, Cadet Woods was given the role of Deputy Wing Commander for a cadet wing consisting of 225 officer candidates. She holds many leadership positions and extracurriculars outside of the Air Force ROTC, including her involvement in Arnold Air Society, a professional honorary service organization. Currently, she manages the strategic communications of 13 squadrons in 5 states as the AAS Region 8 Director of Public Affairs. Nicole uses her leadership not only to develop herself, but also to develop her peers. She has consistently demonstrated herself to be caring and compassionate and is a great example of servant leadership. A fun fact about Nicole is that she has played guitar for 8 years. Acoustic or electric or both?
Both.
All right, good, good. Let's give our Student Leaders of the Year a warm welcome, please. And thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. I'd like to present some definitions of sustainability and sustainability leadership to give us a shared understanding as we begin our discussion. The National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 committed the United States to sustainability, declaring it a national policy to, quote, create and maintain conditions under which humans and nature can exist in productive harmony that permit fulfilling the social, economic, and other requirements of present and future generations. And from UCLA, sustainability is the integration of environmental health, social equity, and economic vitality in order to create thriving, healthy, diverse, and resilient communities for this generation and generations to come. The practice of sustainability recognizes how these issues are interconnected and requires a systems approach and an acknowledgement of complexity. Sustainable practices support ecological, human, and economic health and vitality. And according to Andre Taylor, a leadership specialist from Australia, sustainability leadership is a process of influence that delivers direction, alignment, and commitment, and aims to address social, environmental, and economic issues to create a better world. In other words, sustainability leadership is about thriving people, communities, and economies, and a thriving planet, and leadership that can help move us in a positive direction. So now I'm going to offer a statement to each of our panelists and then give them a few minutes to respond to it. And then we have a few other questions, and we'll hopefully develop some organic conversation up here on the stage, and then we'll get to your questions in a little bit. So wherever you fall on the spectrum of climate change as a crisis and whether or not it's a threat to a sustainable future, surveys indicate that shifting attitudes towards climate change often fall along generational lines. A 2021 Pew Research report found that Gen Z, roughly those under 25, that'd be you all, is overwhelmingly worried about climate change. 76% of them say that it's one of their biggest social concerns, while 37% make it their number one concern. What are your thoughts on this statistic, and what is your own attitude towards doing what we can to ensure a sustainable future? Megan. Oh, sorry, Nicole. Sorry.
Yeah, so as a psychology major, we talk a lot about environmentalism, obviously. Um, from my perspective, our generation is pretty into the climate change topic. I mean, it is the planet that we're inheriting. And so now that more data and research, empirical data is indicating that, you know, our climate is warming, ice caps are melting, we're seeing the effects of the environment, human impact on the environment. I think that statistic would be accurate, and I think, you know, I'm seeing a very huge shift in my generation towards basically recognizing what is happening to our environment. So.
Thanks, Nicole.
Yes, I think that the media we're a lot more, our Gen Z generation is very interconnected in that sense. And I think that through the media, we've been able to change the mindset of sustainability as it's no longer a sacrifice, but instead an opportunity, especially in the business realm of how can you have, with technology advancing so much, how can you be a more sustainable corporation and start from the top up and really lead by example from those bigger corporations to turn that mindset from a sacrifice to an opportunity.
I think for me, it really gets me thinking about sustainable leadership in the sense of sustaining our leaders. As Seth brought up, I did just have the opportunity to meet with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and during that trip, we spent a lot of time talking about how in a world where there's so many issues that we're currently facing, how can we as leaders, you know, stay healthy ourselves? How can we make sure that we're not feeling guilty for prioritizing certain issues within our lives? And so I think, you know, a little bit about meditation. I spend a lot of time researching that as well as practicing it myself and looking at how that can sustain me when looking at huge global issues that can be somewhat overwhelming. So I think coming back to meditation and looking at, you know, these huge issues from the sense of we're all one being, we're all trying to create a better future for ourselves and our loved ones. And I think that's really important to consider when looking at this.
Thank you all. That's an interesting point, Megan. It causes me to think about many of these issues are overwhelming, like you just noted. And so how do you all maintain a pragmatic realism, acknowledging the complex issues that you're going to have to face and you know, take lead of in your future careers, while also maintaining hope and a positive can-do attitude? And meditation might be one way to do it. I'm interested to hear what might be some other ways that you all kind of maintain that hope and that grit that we can affect change.
I try to keep an objective perspective on environmentalism and how much I can really impact the environment. I think individual impact, you know, I'm probably not the greatest contributor to the environmental changes, climate change. So holding on to hope, it can be tough because a lot of the news lines speak on our world deteriorating. But, you know, I just try to keep in the perspective that if I can minimize my footprint on this planet, I think I'm doing a service to the world in doing that. I think probably our greatest focus should shift towards companies and organizations that are actually, you know, heavily contributing to greenhouse gases on our planet. So.
Anything else? Okay.
I think keeping hope too is just being okay with the little changes that we're making. I know for me personally, I always feel a lot of pressure to make huge changes within my lifestyle in order to be more environmentally friendly. And while those are great, I think they're incredibly important. I think it's also important to celebrate the little wins of remembering your reusable bags when you go to the grocery store, or bringing a reusable water bottle and being able to use that throughout the day. For me, being proud of myself for making those little steps so that I can, you know, over time, all those little steps will lead to one big change that is allowing me to help, you know, keep the planet going.
I agree with that. And I also would add that I think for me, like, a lot of it is having those tough conversations almost. Like, one of my roommates, she interned for the Environmental Protection Agency, and I loved hearing like what she would learn about and getting her perspective and hearing the varying perspectives, because I think being able to talk to it and really understand where the world is at helps me be able to see where my impact can go.
So I want to read you a quote from a recent graduate from somewhere in the U.S. Who's now working in sustainability in the business realm. And we have two business students sitting up here. And then psychology plays a significant factor in consumer choices, et cetera, and how we kind of interact on the consumer level. So here's the quote, again, interested in your reactions and thoughts on it, and then have one additional question after I read it. Environmental issues are not just environmental issues, but rather one avenue to help address the issues in society, says a 23-year-old recent college graduate who works at a company that helps businesses achieve their sustainability goals. It is about finding solutions for the planet we are on, but is also finding solutions for the people being most negatively impacted by climate change. So again, what's your reaction to this quote, and how do we help ensure diverse voices, experiences, and communities are part of any solution we collectively come up with?
Well, our environment is basically a reflection of our society. That's why you have a lot of impoverished parts of the world that are struggling and whose environment is reflective of that. So I think, how we treat our environment says a lot about our community. And I think to inspire change, we really have to, really take a reflective period and see, like, okay, how is our society built? And what second and third order effects is it causing? For example, Japan is a very polite society. And so their environment is pristine. I mean, the way that they treat their public spaces, it's absolutely beautiful. So I think it's really important to think about what kind of impact our society is leaving, because American society is different from other kinds, and so it does have some major effects on our world and the spaces that we live in.
Yeah, in the first part of that quote, you talked about how it's kind of opened the doors of other issues by talking about the environmental issues. And I think that that's a big thing, especially in the business world. Once sustainability started to be like more of a topic of conversation and more brought about, then we turned more towards the also social governance. And I think that's really important to a sustainable future and to a thriving community, is incorporating all different backgrounds and people. And I think that that really leads to whether the environment is thriving. And I think that by opening that door and having that open communication, we are able to see these other issues. I think, talking to the second part of the quote, I think something that's hard is that usually the people that are most affected by climate change and other environmental issues are the people that are contributing to it the least. And like the corporations, big corporations, are the ones contributing to it most. So I think it's really important that you take the holistic perspective on the world and seeing how we can benefit everyone to the greater net benefit.
So let's stay on the business side of things for the moment. You commonly hear about businesses wanting to do well economically, for their bottom line, but also to do good. And so I'm curious, as younger consumers, how does a business's perspective on sustainability and what they either are doing or are not doing impact your consumer choices, if at all?
I think for myself personally, I've seen a shift in how trendy sustainability almost is. Like, it turns into a new thing where you can get really good press when you are a sustainable business. Like, you think about Patagonia, and people want to shop at Patagonia because they are a sustainable business and because you support what they're doing and their beliefs and their values. And I think that if more companies can keep that shift going and we keep that trend going, it's going to just overall create a greater net benefit for the world.
Yeah, I think for me, I've gotten to a point where I'm willing to spend a little bit more on something if it aligns with the value of it's going to last a long time. I don't want to buy things anymore that are going to fall apart super fast and have to buy something new, or, you know, just because it's what's trending right now in fashion, but probably won't be trending next month. So I think also buying less, but buying things that'll last for a longer period of time and will be something I wear forever is something that's really important to me.
Seth, I see a hand raised in the crowd. I don't know if we want to let them jump in yet, or if they want to.
Lucas, there's a hand for a note card. No, we'll take those at the end. Yeah, that's our system. Yeah, gotta follow the system. Okay, well, let's turn our attention to leadership and leader competencies a little bit. And from your perspective, all of you have been on a leadership journey, and each of you has intentionally chosen to participate in curricular and co-curricular leadership development, programming, and opportunities during your time here at CU Boulder. So I applaud you for that, and hope you continue on your lifelong journey of leader development. What leadership competencies, which could be defined as the specific skills, knowledge, abilities, and behaviors that are essential for effectively leading yourself, which you talked a little bit about, Megan, with the meditation and kind of starting internally, effectively leading teams, and then also work and organizations. So what competencies do you think are critical for contributing to a sustainable future as you get ready to launch off into your professional careers or think about graduate school perhaps? What's top of mind for you given all that you've learned as leaders here at the university?
Oh, I love this question. So I would say as both a psychology major and through my military background with Air Force ROTC, I think the biggest skill competency that you can work on as a leader is emotional intelligence. So we have two different types of intelligence. You have, the IQ, which, indicates your actual intelligence, your ability, your spatial intelligence, how well do you read, how well do you figure out problems. But, even people with the highest IQ scores, they're getting outperformed by people with more average IQ scores because of their EQ, their emotional intelligence. So if I had any advice to give to people on what skill that they can use and what skill that they can build, for any phase of their life, it's EQ. All the data points to people with higher EQ outperform people with, high IQ. So that is a skill that I've, worked on a lot through my time in Air Force ROTC. We do need leaders who are competent in what they do and what kind of skills that they bring to the Air Force, to the armed services. But I think, emotional intelligence is probably the most driving factor in leading people. So yeah, that's
Can you help us define emotional intelligence a little bit more, please?
So I'm reading a book right now for one of my Air Force ROTC classes. And emotion, I remember defining it for my teacher as it being an innate skill that people have to read situations, to understand how to react to certain situations, how to balance people. But it's not just an innate skill. It's something that you can build and improve. So it's not static, it's fluid. And the time and the energy that you invest in better understanding yourself, self-awareness and how you manage your emotions, that's an incredible skill to have in any organization, in any industry that you're a part of. So I would really hammer home EQ and my psychology background too. Work on your emotions. I mean, that's a pretty useful skill to work on.
Great, thanks, Nicole.
Sure. I just think communication is a fundamental skill that you have to have in order to be a leader. especially now when there's so many polarized opinions, I think, on a lot of issues today. Being able to be someone that can not only communicate what you're feeling, thinking, but also being able to listen to what's being communicated and put away any internal biases that you have in a situation. When I'm trying to lead a team, I really try to be not the loudest person in the room. I really appreciate being able to hear other people's opinions and voices and encourage people who maybe don't necessarily feel comfortable speaking yet to share their opinion. Because I know I used to be a quiet person in the room, and I wish that more people had asked what I was thinking. So I think just communicating and not coming into situations with an internal bias that's not allowing you to truly listen to the people on your team.
And to add on to that, when I was, first starting out in Air Force ROTC, the kind of leadership that I was taught to embody was being the loudest person in the room. But if everybody's the loudest person in the room, you cannot share everybody's ideas. And so you do have to foster that environment where the quietest people can speak too and contribute. So that diversity in leadership and personality is really important. We don't need people who have all the answers right away, who can, be loud and confident and speak in front of a crowd. We also need the people who, are a little bit more reserved. So I 100% agree with that. And EQ, to speak on that once again, it helps build this environment of safety. In whatever industry that you're part of, it's not just the military, it's not just business. If you can really contribute, this Simon Sinek calls it a circle of safety. If you can make, as a leader, if you can make an environment where people feel safe to share their ideas and who they are, you're gonna perform. You're gonna outperform any of your competitors, any of your adversaries. So build that environment where people of all personalities can, share who they are and what they value.
For me, I would say I love what both Megan and Nicole said. And to add on to that, I think some key qualities that I've seen in leaders that have really stood out to me and that I try to then emulate in myself is empathy and integrity. And I think that it's really important to as a leader to know that you don't have all the right answers and you never will. And it's all about my growth as a leader. And I've seen a lot more in college a shift from for myself personally that leadership isn't anymore a title. In high school it's oh, who's the captain of the team, who's this, but in college it's more who can find my strengths and give me the confidence to bring them about. And I've seen that through a lot of my mentors in college, that they've seen things in myself and gave me the confidence that I didn't have coming into college freshman year. And then I've tried to emulate that into the people that I lead and that I can mentor and help them see their strengths, but then not just see the strengths, but help them connect the dots into where that's going to push them and help them flourish and grow into the best person that they can be.
Excellent. Thank you all. There you have it, folks. The top 3 competencies for future leaders in the sustainability realm. I think you're spot on, all of you, and Nicole in particular. I don't know the faculty member's name, but one of our Leeds business faculty members recently put out an article on that very topic of organizations and leaders being the most effective when they're focusing on EQ and developing that in their organization from entry level to middle management to senior management. So it's out there in the business realm. People are talking about it. People are training for it. So I think you're very much spot on. And then likewise, empathy and compassion. And you could maybe add humility. I think there's a recent article as well here at the university that talked about humility, which I could kind of clump together with empathy and compassion. Being a way to gain influence. And at the end of the day, a lot of leadership is about being able to influence others, kind of no matter who you are and no matter where you are in the organization. And then yes, communication, Megan, is key and critical, and seeking input from diverse voices. We talk a lot about civil discourse here at the university and in the Center for Leadership, and I think all 3 of those competencies are critical for us to engage in civil discourse, which is going to be required for us to tackle the complex issues of sustainability and climate change and all the social issues that are wrapped up in it. So thank you for sharing that. In business and in STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, for those of you who may not have heard that acronym before, in business and STEM fields, women remain underrepresented in general and in leadership roles specifically. How do we shape and grow tomorrow's women sustainability leaders? What are we not doing that we should be doing to accomplish this imperative?
So there's a age-old adage about, do we want to focus on diversity or do we want to focus on can people perform the job? I think that's super relevant to the military, and I'm going to be using my military background a lot through this panel. Going into Air Force ROTC, I always knew that I wanted to join the military, but I also understood that it was a very male-dominated career field. So, as a female, I was a little intimidated going into that, thinking, would I be denied opportunities based on my gender? Or, would I have to work twice as hard as my male peers to get recognized? I think everything that I experienced in Air Force ROTC subverted my expectations about military leadership. I have met so many wonderful, high-level female leaders in the military, not just the Air Force, but also the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, also the Coast Guard, and Space Force. And I think I spoke on EQ, but also the most, high-performing organizations are the ones that are the most cognitively diverse. So how do we think? And the best way to bring that cognitive diversity is by bringing people of multiple identities. So it's not just, a male-dominated career field. It's also females. It's also people of different religions, different backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses. This is so important. But again, comes back to that question. Do we want to give opportunities to people based on their identity, or do we want to give opportunities to people based on can they perform? And I think women can perform in leadership positions, and they can do, just as much as a man, even more. So I think my culture and my community really empowered me as a female, and I can't say that for every community, but if we can focus on those smaller communities and making sure that that women and young girls feel like they can accomplish things that are male dominated. If we can start there, that leads to so many greater second and third order effects for women.
Going off of that, I'm also in a more naturally male-dominated field, not only just in business, but in finance. And in my past 2 internships, I worked first in private equity and then in asset management at BlackRock. And some of the people that really stood out to me were those female leaders that had that spunk and that grit to just keep going. And I think that that's like a big thing that they're really pushing for. Like in my internships, they also have various women-led organizations to really help you foster that confidence and foster those networking connections that are going to lead you to those female leaders. And it really just inspired me that that's the place I want to be at in my future. I want to be one of those female leaders that I'm thinking about right now in my head that have stood out to me, and I want to be that for someone else. And I think that the businesses and corporations that are having that drive and are seeing that potential and really putting female in those senior leadership positions is where we're going to see like big growth.
I think part of it too, and something that I've always struggled with, is feeling like I'm enough for the roles that I'm given. I think as a woman, if I'm too loud, I'm told I'm too bossy, it's too much, that I need to be a little quieter. But then if I'm a little quieter, I'm too quiet. I should have shared more of my opinion. I should have given more of myself to what was going on. So I think we also need to start letting go of this idea that women just can't be enough in a situation, and encourage women to feel like they are enough, to feel like they can do it from the start, and that you're building on it throughout your career. Like, it's not like you need to come in and be the perfect employee the second you step in. And if women felt more comfortable in those positions, I think there would be more women that were willing to take the leap and go into a field that's currently male dominated.
Well, kudos to all 3 of you for killing it in male-dominated areas of study and future careers, as evidenced by your stature and all the things you're involved in. You raise really good points, and as someone of, at least 2 generations ahead of you, a white male, I'm constantly learning and trying to evolve in my understanding of leadership and interacting with and working with female colleagues. And I've spent most of my career working at a university, so I've had lots of female colleagues, sometimes predominantly female colleagues over the course of my career. And I've fumbled and I've stumbled and I've made lots of mistakes. So it's good to keep pushing, I guess. And I would encourage you, as you can continue in your journeys and get out into the professional world, keep pushing and keep the courage and bring those skills and those perspectives that you all just shared, because we need all voices, especially when it comes to all the sustainability issues around the world, which we're really not here to talk about at length, but thank you for that. Okay, let's go back to a more of a reaction type question, because this just recently happened, so I'm really interested to hear from you from a leadership perspective. This past Saturday, so not even a week ago, 21-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, you kind of grew up with her. She's the youngest ever Time Person of the Year back in 2019, and she's widely credited with raising public awareness of climate change across the world, especially among young people. So last Saturday, she was detained by Dutch police at a demonstration in The Hague, Netherlands, after attempting with several other people to block a major highway into the city, calling for action to reverse climate change, which of course she's been doing a lot. Not her first time being arrested, by the way. Some have called this just another staged publicity stunt. Others applaud her for her willingness and ability to draw public attention to the climate change conversation. Still others may call this sustainability leadership. What are your thoughts on this? And do you agree or disagree with her tactics? Again, thinking from a leadership perspective in particular.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of dedication to what she's doing, and I think it takes a lot of risk. And so for that, I think that's impressive. And I think, it's not ideal. I think there are a lot of activists who, block roadways, and then they're not very appreciated for blocking roadways because people have to get to work, blocking traffic. But I would say that what she's doing is very impressive, and I think we need more people who are going to go out there and bring awareness to these issues. I think she's probably maybe the best activist of our time. And, I've, researched a lot about activism. There was a woman back in the 90s who saved a redwood tree. Her name is Julia Butterfly Hill. And she lived in the tree for 2 years. She climbed the tree and she made a home out of it. And that sort of activism and dedication to the environment is incredibly impressive. And I think we need more of that. And I think Greta Thunberg definitely embodies that. Our environment, our world is at stake here. And so I think it is an important issue to stand on, even if it has some, consequences for her in terms of, getting arrested. I recently saw an article where the Capitol building cafeteria got shut down by people who were protesting Israel, trying to bring awareness to the food shortage in Gaza and the West Bank. And I think we need more of that as a society. We don't really see those really big, sweeping actions from the people. And I think if the people got together, they would accomplish so many things. I think it was just recently, I believe it was in Iceland, there was an incredible turnout of 200,000 women who had come to protest, I think, wage gap differences between men and women. And that is so empowering to me, and it shows everybody has humanity and everybody does care. You kind of see some apathy in our world right now. And if we can bring attention to these issues, even if it's not the best way, Like, do I think blocking traffic is maybe the most ideal way to bring awareness to climate change? Maybe not, but it's got people thinking. It's caught your attention, and hopefully it stays in your mind. So.
Nicole spoke like exactly to what I would say. For me, I'm a strong supporter of standing up for what you believe in, and that's exactly what she was doing. While I don't think that necessarily blocking major roadways is the way to do it, she got the press she was looking for. We're talking about it right now, and like it's getting that in the forefront of everyone's mind again. And so I see both sides, and I'm honestly in the middle.
I love that Nicole brought up apathy, because I feel like we're constantly bombarded with all of these issues that are going on, especially with climate. I hear about a climate problem every single day. It's always in my news feed. It's always, I listen to the daily podcast for the New York Times, and it comes up quite often talking about climate and how it's bad. It's really bad. And so I think hearing that constantly, it makes me pretty apathetic towards it, just because it's always being talked about. But then hearing about someone who is passionate, who is really concerned and is doing things to make that change, it kind of reignites that flame of, oh, this is something I really need to think about. This is something I should care about. It's something I want to talk about, because this is a problem that is being brought to light. And I think right now, sometimes we need to do large, big actions that aren't ideal in order to bring back the conversation to the table.
Thank you all. Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to add on that, like, again, with the apathy point, like, the amount of, media that we're receiving is very negative. Like, if you were to open up any sort of news channel or news article, it's just a constant stream of what's going wrong in the world. So it's good to hear what's going right.
So you hit on earlier a little bit about everybody can be a leader, and that's certainly something we believe, in the Center for Leadership, and I think in the programs that you all are involved in, leadership is within us all. And leadership is not a title, not a position. It involves enlisting and influencing others in a common cause. So thinking about activism and thinking about having your voice heard, how do you inspire a shared vision and enable others to act without having formal authority? Especially think about earlier in your career when you're attempting to influence up in an organization, short of course, getting arrested.
Yeah, I would not recommend getting arrested to
Especially
make it to inspire
Nicole,
change.
right?
Yeah, I do
probably
not.
Be bad for a military.
Yeah, I don't want my military career to have an arrest record. But that's a great question. So, as Seth mentioned, I was deputy wing commander last semester for my Air Force ROTC program. So that meant managing and leading the unit of over 200 cadets. And when you have cadet in your title, you're all the same level. It's pure leadership, at its finest. It's really hard to lead peers, right? Because you don't have maybe the title or the authority to command that. It's basically your reputation and your rapport with those individuals that makes you a good leader. And to inspire change, it can be a little bit difficult from that perspective. But I think the best way that you can empower people in your organization to perform and get the mission done is it's really the basic things, like get to know them, who they are, what they want out of life. That whenever I'm a part of a new team, I make an effort to just sit down with people, get coffee, get lunch, dinner, whatever it may be, and just like ask them, hey, how's your family? What do you do outside of ROTC? What do you do outside of the mission set that we're performing? I think that really does inspire change, because the organization as a whole needs to agree on the change. It's not just you as an individual who's going to make the change happen. And to do that, you need to empower people. The best way to empower people is to show them that you care about their life and what they want out of life. And so I think the best way you can do that, inspiring it up and down the organizational chain, it starts with you building the team and getting to know who they are, caring. That's so important.
Great point. Relational influence. and networks.
That was the only way I was able to make a great impact. It was by creating connections with people on my team and in my program and saying, hey, I know this feels monumental, but like we can accomplish it because I know what kind of person you are, who you are. I know what makes you tick. I know, where you're from, what kind of culture, what kind of society you came from. So that's so important. Just care about your people. It seems, straightforward and simple, but, you just have to demonstrate that every day.
I think for me too, I always make it a point to show up for the people I'm working with, whether that be within the professional realm on my team, making sure I'm there for class, I'm there for any kind of project we need to do, making sure I'm contributing in the way that's needed, but also outside of that team. If a friend of mine comes and tells me, hey, I'm doing this thing, I'm super excited about it, I make a point to be there in the crowd, be there to support them, because it's little things like that over time, I feel like allow someone to trust you, and trust is huge when it comes to leading people, because I know I've recently took on the position as the student assistant for the Service and Social Action Living Learning Community that was open this year, and I'll be running it next year. And what I've found is that the mentees who continue to come back, the freshmen who want to talk to me and spend time with me in our office and ask me for help, are the ones that trust that I'll be there when they need them. So I think developing that trust and being there for those people is what I value the most when it comes to this.
I agree completely with both the relationship side, and then the trust builds right into that with the relationships. And I think that a big thing, like in the business world for myself, like everyone talks about networking and forming those connections, and I think something that I always think about is like networking should never be a transactional thing where you're looking for a connection for what am I going to get out of this, but instead I'm building a connection here to build that relationship that Nicole referenced, to then further see where we can grow together. And I think I see that a lot in like my peers and like coworkers in that realm, is if we can further this connection and then we can reach out to higher levels and further connection with them, the people that really can have that bigger influence and power. But when they trust you from almost a friend standpoint, then it's so much easier to get that door open and make those positive changes that you're trying to make.
And to harken back to the circle of safety concept, so if you've ever read anything by Simon Sinek, I would encourage you, if you haven't, and if you want to build your leadership, but that circle of safety, that trust, so important.
Well, thank you all, and I think, coming out of the post-pandemic experience, there's a lot of discussion and thinking around just not a new reality, but something that came to light because we were all isolated in our homes, and as we viewed into each other's lives, we saw homes in the background, we saw pets, we saw family members, and so the recognition and acknowledgement that we are whole people and we bring that to each facet of our life. And so building trust, forming authentic connections, and focusing on relationships in a work environment matters, and that builds your leadership capacity and influence, which in turn builds your overall ability to affect change. And in this case, we're talking about change that can impact people, planet, communities, the economy, and our planet. So thank you for that. One last question, and then we'll get into any audience questions that there are. If you had to choose one wicked sustainability problem, so wicked being super complex, potentially global in expanse, and could take years and years to solve. So thinking about one of those, what would it be? Which one would you want to focus your sustainability leadership energies on, and why? Take a moment if you need to. Nicole's ready.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of issues I would focus on, but I think the most interesting one that I'm learning about is space, the space domain. In late 2019, some of y'all might have noticed that we created a Space Force, a United States Space Force. And I'm sure some of y'all were like, why do we need a Space Force? It's it's not Star Wars or Star Trek. It's actually, we're not trying to fly to the moon or, create a find a new world to inhabit yet. But space is becoming a new domain of warfare, and something that we're seeing is a really big shift in warfare. So it's not the traditional like guns a-blazing, type of military warfare that you would see like in World War II. We're starting to see like non-kinetic warfare. So, and a really big way of doing that is both through cyber attacks, but also through space. Space is a really important domain for us. It's how we have GPS. It's how we have a lot of conveniences. And so there are people in this world, there are states in this world who are fighting against each other in space. And space is pretty lawless right now. It's a completely new domain, and I mean, we see so much stuff with SpaceX and people trying to privatize space, but there's not a lot of ethics or codes of conduct that we can rely on in space because it is a completely new domain for us. How much of space do we own, quote unquote? And so space is going to be really big for us, especially as a human race. Like if we want to leave this planet at some point and conquer the stars, it has to start now, especially with our climate as it is. So space is probably the most interesting thing for me because I'd went to a conference in San Diego for Air Force ROTC, like a club, Arnold Air Society, and I got to hear the chief of space operations, or the previous one, he's retired now, General Raymond, speak on it. And space is becoming incredibly important, and I don't think our society speaks about it enough. It seems far out, but we have so many satellites in space. There's so much debris in space. How are we going to eventually colonize the moon? Since that is a goal through multiple agencies in America and also private corporations. So the wicked problem I'd focus on is space, and also I love Star Wars. So space is like the new frontier for me, so I find it very interesting.
So, quick question, hold your thoughts, Kayla and Megan. What would you say, Nicole, to someone who just heard that response and has thought a little bit about, this issue? Why on earth would we spend billions of dollars on developing technology to develop our own Jamestown, for those of you that have seen For All Mankind, on the moon, a colony on the moon, a station on the moon? Why would we do that when we have so many issues right here at home, in our communities, in our economies, of course, in our environment, all the things we're sort of touching upon? Why should we even bother?
It's a good question. So a lot of our adversaries, American adversaries, are, trying to destabilize us as a state, as a nation. And one of those ways is space. We have so many technological systems in space. Your ability to navigate with Google Maps, I'm pretty sure, is linked to our GPS systems. And if we were to destroy satellites, that could have, potentially extreme consequences to our economy. And again, it seems far removed, but we have so many systems in space. And space is the frontier if we want to leave this planet, if we want to find something that's more sustainable than Earth. Again, I think it's important to note, hey, we got to start focusing on our Earth because we can't rely on space systems right now. We can't fly faster than light as of right now. We have so much tied into space that it would be, negligent to ignore conflict in that domain. So that's why we have a United States Space Force. That's why we have such a larger focus on space. So it's definitely not something that you would expect as a wicked problem, but it is.
A future session for CWA, perhaps. Thanks, Nicole.
I would say for me, one wicked problem that I follow a lot and that I hope that we really do see change in is the fast fashion industry. I'll be honest, I was definitely one of the naive people back in middle school and high school that didn't really realize what was going on in fast fashion. And it was oh, I can get a shirt for $2. That's awesome. I should just buy that. And then you realize that it's very unsustainable in the sense, like, I have a huge love for, like, not love, but care for people and children in poverty in other countries. And I think that you see that a lot with fast fashion, and like that's the influence that if you're putting your money into fast fashion, you're really supporting impoverished communities, and that like, is not something I support. So that's something that I follow and have tried to really influence on not only myself but my peers, and not ordering like on Shein anymore. That was a very huge like trend for a while in high school, and it was like you can get just cheap clothes from China that you don't really know who's making them, and that's something that I'm really passionate about, that young children should not be doing that, obviously, but
I think my wicked problem is young adults and children experiencing grief, specifically those who have lost a parent. I lost my dad when I was 15, and for me, I felt so incredibly alone. I still do sometimes, because we as a society don't know how to talk about grief. I go up to someone and I'm like, yeah, I lost my dad when I was 15, and they don't know how to respond. They don't know if they should say they're sorry. They don't know what you want in response. And especially for people who haven't lost someone, there's this divide. It's really hard to empathize when you haven't lost someone close to you before. And so I've been spending the past year trying to figure out how to make that a better conversation, especially at CU, trying to create some resources for students as well, because since coming here, I know a lot of people that have lost someone, whether it be a sibling, a student at CU, anyone in their life. It's really life-altering. So I think that's something that's always on my mind, is how can we better support someone that might be feeling alone after a loss that great.
I want to touch on that because as a psych major, I took a class on death in other cultures and societies, and that in American society, we have a really big fear of death compared to other states. A lot of East Asian countries like don't have that same type of fear, and it's so much more emotionally healthy and like easier to process when you don't fear age or you don't fear death. In America, we're very independent people, and we think, I've got to accomplish a lot in my lifetime if I want to be successful, and if I want to do something with my lifetime. And we have this fear of aging, where it's like, oh, I don't want to grow old. I got to stay young. I got to stay, on the grind, so to speak. So I think, talking about grief is really important, especially in mental health. Grief is a big part of everybody's lives. Raise your hand if you've lost somebody. Basically all of us. It's a part of the human condition, so I think that's a really good, wicked problem. And also to speak on your point about fast fashion, that is like so good what you're doing, because, when we think about how we want to impact the environment, like how do we want to do that, it can feel monumental because, it's not our individual impact, it's very much larger corporations. But when you have multiple, like really big groups of people who just, decide based on their values, I'm not going to shop here, that has a really big impact, and it shows companies like, we're not going to accept products, or we're not going to consume products that are not ethically made. Like, I'm not going to buy a product that was made by a child who is working insane amounts of hours. So those were both really interesting to hear about.
Well, thank you for moderating, Nicole. I appreciate that.
Sorry about that.
Well done, well done. I don't need to say any more. Those are all really important issues. I guess I will just close before we invite Lucas up here to bring any audience questions. Megan, what you talked about, self-leadership, right? Dealing with that grief and the lifelong experience that losing a parent at a young age, has had for you. But self-leadership, if we aren't taking care of ourselves, then we can't affect the change that we're hoping to in whatever, sector and sphere of influence we're looking to have. So kudos to you for that, doing that hard work. And fast fashion, yeah. Are you willing to wear the same thing for 20 years, though? I guess that's the question, We all like to have some new things, but I love that, because that's a really critical issue. And, we should make more things that are durable and long-lasting, in all areas of consumer products, especially fashion, yeah. And then space, we kind of already talked about that. So All right, Lucas, we are ready for some audience questions. Thank you for those wicked problems. Looks like we have a few. I'm going to do a quick scan. We would like to give some preference to any students in the audience. Great questions. Ooh. Okay, I'm not seeing any identified as student questions, so I'm just gonna pick a hot topic. I got a hot topic in here. Some good ones actually. Do you think that environmental sustainability will play a role in the 2024 elections in November?
You know, from my personal perspective, I haven't seen too much on climate. I've seen a lot of the Democratic base being about Roe v. Wade and issues surrounding, healthcare, and especially our involvement in both Ukraine and Israel. So I think those are going to be the primary platforms, domestically, female healthcare. Admittedly, I'm not too familiar with the Republican base, but I haven't seen too much on climate. I don't think that's a priority in this election season as of right now, just because we've had some major changes at the Supreme Court level. So yeah, I don't know if you two have anything to speak on that.
I have seen a lot of my friends posting that it should be something that's being discussed right now. For me personally, I'm really interested in female reproductive rights, so that's something that I've been following heavily, but I haven't seen as much about environmental issues either.
I agree. I think it's kind of something that just like we talked about a lot today, like it just looms there, and it's kind of like in the back as opposed to more at the front of your press release stuff. But
That could be a whole session as well. Thank you for that question, and thank you for those
Thank you for the question.
This one gets kind of digging into the business realm a little bit. There are ISO standards, international standards, that define how often a business discusses its environmental impact and its plan to improve, but doesn't define what it should do necessarily. Do you think requiring this conversation is enough to create more sustainable companies?
personally, no. I think that that leads more towards the greenwashing effect, in the sense that you say what you're going to do and then you don't necessarily follow through, or the metrics don't really prove what you're saying your company's doing. So I think that it has to, actions speak louder than words. It has to go past just the talking stage and the press release and into saying, here's what we saw, here's what we did, here's our impact, and here's what we're going to do continuing forward.
Because Gen Z, you're savvy. You can look beyond a company's website that might have a sustainability statement and to discover that they may not have a sustainability manager or officer or someone who has that as their sole job. So I think you're right. It has to go much deeper than that. Other thoughts? Megan, Nicole? Okay. We have a few more minutes. What level of economic diversity is sustainable on a global sense?
I think this is a tough question to answer. You got any economic experts here?
That question raises for me, the idea that is perpetual economic growth, in the best interest of thriving, communities, people, planet, and economies. Economies, sure, but is it realistic? Is it attainable? Is it desirable? Maybe they're getting a little bit at that.
I think it comes back to this idea of, utilitarianism that really lives within our business world. The idea of you're getting the greatest outcome with the least amount of issues along the way. But I feel like when we talk about the least amount of issues, usually sustainable issues are kind of what get thrown to the wayside in order to achieve this level of profit or that sort of thing. But I think now Gen Z is thinking a lot more about, this is a great profit, but it's not going to be achievable in 20 years because we're destroying our environment in order to get that profit. So for me, it kind of raises this question of, should we be going for the greatest profit if, we're harming so many things along the way, or maybe we slow it down a little bit and truly think about what are our values as a society, and are those values profit?
I think in the past there's been more of a divide between what's like profit and sustainability, and that with like advancements in technology and what we're seeing, like for example, you used to always have to have a petroleum gas car, right? Now you can have electric vehicles. And so I think that the gap is slowly closing, and hopefully that there can be a middle ground where you still can achieve those high profits with things that are benefiting, or not, maybe not benefiting, but not harming society. And I think that if you can find that middle ground, and businesses can, that's when we're gonna be able to really have to stop choosing between one or the other.
Great points and a perfect segue, Megan, into the next question. This person wants to know, what is the correct relationship between technology and sustainability?
Whoa, they read my mind.
So that's a really good question. I don't know who you are in the crowd, but thank you for that one. So, a correct relationship. I'd have to think about it a little bit more. I think there's a lot of, ethics that come into sustainability, like what kind of technology can we implement to improve our environment? Obviously, we want to try to stray away from using technological, any kind of technology that could harm our environment, but it seems that we have a lot of that type of technology, like fracking, for example. It's not like the most ideal, technological means, but I'd have to think about that question a little bit more.
Yeah, so when I studied abroad this past year in Barcelona, I took a class on like sustainable urbanization, like of cities. And a big thing that I was researching was like the new technologies that create sustainable smart cities. So one thing that I still remember reading about were these new smart city lights, street lights that they can like dim or brighten based on not only like the time of day, but how many people are around, and help with like parking and all these different crazy things and I think that's what we need to push like towards, is finding those technologies that then create a more sustainable future, because cities want these cool new technologies. People want the new technologies. Plenty of people buy a Tesla not just for the environmental benefits, right, for the new technology. And I think that we can see that in not only businesses, but in personal lives, and also like bigger grand scheme of things like cities that are doing that. I think it's mostly, you see it in the Netherlands and like Denmark, that are really pushing towards those smarter cities. But if we can see like that positive growth in those cities, then hopefully other cities will adopt that as well.
Fantastic. That caused me to think about a question that's circulating. Are EVs more sustainable than internal combustion engines? Because there's an environmental footprint to EVs that I think a lot of people don't necessarily consider. So fascinating question. Thank you for that. We're not going to have enough time to get to, there's 2 or 3 more questions, but thank you all for submitting those. There is one related to the Space Force that causes me, Nicole, to think a little bit about, I guess I'll broaden this question about the Space Force promoting division or cooperation, and thinking about how the military contributes to a sustainable future in 1 minute.
1
53
minute.
seconds, actually.
Oh gosh, the pressure is coming down. All right. So, yeah, I'm about to join the Air Force. I'm about to graduate here in a month. And in a few months, I'm going to be, instead of walking around campus, I'm going to be walking around a flight line in England. And I think, I'm not too familiar with every technological means that we have in the military. But I know we're making really grand strides in terms of environment, especially in space. How do we prevent debris from raining down on certain countries? Because, like satellites run into each other. And I think there's a lot of development happening in the Air Force, a little bit above my pay grade, to be honest. But there's a lot of development in technologies that are less impactful on the environment. Because, we see it in our service members where our environment, our military environment is, harming their health. And so we're trying to, diminish ways in which things negatively impact our environment, especially in regards to our service members' health, because, being in loud environments, being in environments where there's a lot of smoke, a lot of haze, cancer-causing, chemicals. I think the military is very mindful of that, and it's not always like publicized what kind of things they're implementing to do that. But in regards to space, they're trying to really create like a sustainable space. Like how do we not fill it up with trash or satellites or other types of debris? So
Fascinating. Thank you for that. Well, we are at the end of our time, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you all very much for sharing your wisdom and insights as our young leaders of the year and future leaders. So thank you all very much.